Welcome to the High Performance Disciple podcast. My name is Gareth Morgan, and my goal is to help you close the gap between your God-given potential and your daily performance. What I do is I explore the explosive combination of timeless spiritual principles and high performance practices that will enable you to take control, to be courageous, and to release the greatness that is in you. This conversation is designed to help high achieving, high impact leaders, entrepreneurs, athletes, and pioneers turn fear into faith, confusion into clarity, frustration into focus, and stress into strategy. If you enjoy what you hear, I would love for you to like it, to subscribe, to comment, and share it with others that you believe in. Here's today's conversation. Welcome to another episode of the High Performance Disciple podcast, where we are helping you become the healthy, high-performing leader that others want to imitate. Being a high performer is a two-edged sword, and you would have experienced this already, I'm sure. One side of it is really positive because we love to grow, we love to achieve, we love to find ways of improving. It's in our DNA. Some people struggle to get motivated, and we do have those moments where maybe we lack motivation, but more often than not, that motivation, that drive is there. The flip side, the other side of the sword, as it were, is that because we're constantly trying to grow and develop, we find those barriers that are stopping us grow. We find the areas where maybe we keep butting up against a reoccurring challenge or mindset or belief, and it can be painful. It can be painful when we keep maybe setting a goal to break through and it feels like we're hitting a ceiling. And I really think that today's episode is going to help us just unpack that, because it is something that you have to dive deep into to start to find ways of breaking through those barriers, because those barriers aren't just simply behaviors, they're beliefs. It's a bit like when you have a car, maybe you're listening to this in a car right now, and you can hear maybe that something isn't quite right. You can hear a sound that isn't normally there, or the performance of the car just isn't as it should be. And you don't know what's going on, but you know something isn't quite right. So what do? You take it to somebody who can go under the bonnet, and they know exactly what they're looking for. They're looking and testing different areas, and they can then diagnose the problem. And it's a bit like that with our lives. We need questions to ask and go under the bonnet of our lives to look at the engine of our beliefs. And because the chassis is okay and everything looks okay from the outside and everything's in place, but it's under the bonnet where the work needs to happen. And we need those expertise. We need that mind to come along and say, hey, have you thought about this? What about this area? And to ask the questions. And that's what I love to do. I love to be the kind of person that goes under the bonnet. You won't have much of a shallow conversation with me. Small talk's an important tool, but it's a gateway into big talk, deep talk, and I love to go there. And so I want to ask the question, and we'll stay on the car theme. Who is really at the wheel of my life? Who is really at the wheel? Who is truly driving this car? Your life, my life. And the reason I ask that, because let me ask you this. Do you ever have those moments where you keep doing something you've told yourself not to do? You've evaluated yourself in a particular situation or circumstance, and you've made a decision. You said, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to behave like that. I'm not going to have that mood or whatever it might be. And you've reflected and you've made a decision. And you've committed that decision, but then you go and do it again and again and again. And you then suddenly ask yourself the question, well, wanting a different outcome doesn't seem to work. there must be something deeper that is going on. And I use the analogy of when I was a small boy, many years ago, I was on my dad's lap in his car, and we were in a private car park, and he said to me, he said, "Would you like to drive?" And I was like, what? Wow, brilliant, yes. And I think I was like 7 or 8 at the time. And so I was sat on his lap, and he said, "Go on then, take the wheel." So I would start to turn the wheel, and of course what he would do is he would have his feet on the pedals, and he'd have his hand on the gear stick, and effectively I thought I was driving. I was steering it, I was directing it and guiding it, although I could see his hand underneath kind of just correcting some of my maneuvers. But essentially I thought I was in control. But the reality was my dad was in control. He really was in control. I thought I was, but really I wasn't. I had my hands on the steering wheel, but he had his feet on the accelerator and the brake and the gear stick, and he could ultimately determine where that car went and where it ended up. And I use that analogy to describe, and I'm going to talk about 2 parts of us as human beings. The conscious you, which is like the little Gareth sat on his dad's lap. We're looking at a steering wheel, we're looking out the window, we're looking at what's in front of us, and we believe, just from our conscious state, that we're in control. But the subconscious, the deeper part of us, which I kind of call the daddy part of us. Okay, so the small boy is the conscious, the daddy is the subconscious. The subconscious, the part of us that we aren't always aware of how it's operating or the influence that it has, is ultimately in control. So when asking the question, well, who is really at the wheel of my life? The answer actually is our subconscious. Now you may say, well, Gareth, well then, can I ever be in control of my life? Well, yes, you can, because there is an interplay between the conscious and the subconscious. There's an interplay between the little boy Gareth and the daddy. And there are certain things that we're going to talk about in this episode and the next episode. I couldn't fit this all into one episode. I mean, this is a deep dive, people. This is not a, giving you 3 tactics and behavior management tools to do X, Y, Z. Like, I'm all for tactics and strategies, but I like talking about the things that create shifts in people. So as with all of the episodes, taking spiritual principles and high performance practices and allowing the 2 to collide and to really help inspire us and inform us, I'm going to look at a proverb. Proverbs is a part of the Old Testament, largely written by King Solomon. And so King Solomon, a historic figure, and of course, for me, the Bible is a historical document. If you're thinking, well, I'm not sure the Bible is history. Well, King Solomon is in history. He's not just in the Bible, he's in multiple of the historical documents. But he wrote these proverbs, wise sayings. And these wise sayings, many of which are in circulation in non-faith, non-religious environments. And the reason being because they're based upon principles. And just as the principle of gravity is no respecter of environments or faith groups or countries or even eras, the same is true of the principles in the Proverbs. So let me read for you this Proverbs, a few verses long, and then we'll unpack as to how this helps us understand a little bit more about who is really at the wheel of our lives. So Proverbs 23, 6-8 says this: "Do not eat the food of a begrudging host. Do not crave his delicacies, for he is the kind of person who is always thinking about the cost. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you. You will vomit," beautiful language there, "vomit up the little you have eaten, and will have wasted your compliments." From that same passage, we get in a different version the saying, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. In a nutshell, the picture that's being given there is of somebody who is saying one thing but meaning something else. You can be in a situation, just to use an identical parallel example, you could be in a situation where somebody's got a slab of cake and it's their favourite cake, and they'll say politely, would you like some? But you know that's what they're saying, but not what they're meaning, because maybe they say it like really, really quick. Would you like some? Oh no, that's okay, no worries. In other words, they didn't really mean, do you want some? They were just saying because that's what they should say. What they really meant was, this is all mine. And of course, as human beings, we are naturally all self-centered and selfish, and it's something that we have to battle with and break through. But what this passage is saying is that the conscious part is saying, do you want some? And we can even be trying to really mean something in our conscious state. You know, I'm making a decision to share this. But something in our subconscious that says, no, this is mine, is battling. There's a civil war inside of you and a civil war inside of me between the intentions that I have and the things that I truly believe and the things I truly want to happen. And it's that civil war that goes on that creates that internal conflict. If you want to take this out of the biblical conversation, then you can look at the term that psychologists use, which is cognitive dissonance, which is when a person's beliefs and behaviors do not align. There's misalignment, okay? In other words, cognitive dissonance is that internal conflict. When I say one thing, but internally something is grating against what I say. Let's flip that into another example. So you could be with a group of friends, colleagues, having a conversation, and the theme of the conversation is going down a route where you start to feel uncomfortable. People are starting to say things. Maybe, let's say, they're saying something about another colleague, friend behind their back. And your value system says, I hate gossip. If I have a problem with something, I should be talking with that person, not about that person. And that's your value system. But right now, you're engaged in a conversation which is going against that deep-rooted value and belief that you have. And the longer that you stay in that situation without doing anything about it, that misalignment ends up causing you internal distress. And so suddenly you realize who is at the wheel of your life. Well, your beliefs are at the wheel of your life. And again, to use the motor car analogy, it's a bit like when your wheels are out of alignment. If you've ever driven a car when the wheels are not aligned, you know that it is not comfortable. Your wrist starts to ache because you're having to constantly apply pressure because your wheels are trying to take you off course. They can't go in a straight line, and you have to constantly create tension, which of course at the very least starts to wear your tires down, and at the worst can be catastrophic because your wheels could blow out. And so that misalignment creates tension, a destructive tension. Now, what do we do about this? Well, let me just unpack this a little bit more, and then between this episode and the next episode, we'll talk about 3 particular things that I think we can start to build into our lives to start to align our subconscious and our conscious, so that we are not at the mercy of our subconscious, but actually we are empowered by our subconscious, okay? You see, we've got to unpack this and understand the process of becoming aware, first of all, of what's truly going on inside of us. If we don't go on this journey, because let's face it, this is not necessarily an urgent conversation. It's not the kind of thing that you wake up one morning and think, I must kind of do a deep dive on my belief system and my subconscious. And whilst it may not seem urgent, the reality is it is creating much of that which is urgent in our lives. Usually many of the things that we are reacting to can be as a result of things that I'm unaware are happening because of my subconscious. Now, I'm not talking about the things that happen to us, that are circumstances that are out of our control. I'm talking about some of our habits, the habitual ways that we have that are just on autopilot, because we all have an autopilot. In fact, that's what I'm going to talk about right now. You see, there's an autopilot part of us where we are operating without even thinking. In other words, we're relying completely on our subconscious. If let me go back to the analogy of me with my dad. If I just decided, when he said to me, you take control of the wheel, if I just decided to take my hands off the wheel, nothing would happen. As in, my dad had his hand down here on the bottom part of the wheel. He had his feet on the pedals, he had his hand on the gear stick. So he was fully in control. He was just allowing me to feel like I was in control. So you have to start to unpack this if you really want to get back at the wheel and be in control of your life. So the first stage, there's 4 stages of how you retrain and reprogram that subconscious part of us. And they talk about, first of all, the first stage is unconscious incompetence. In other words, I don't know what I don't know. So that's the first stage. It's realizing there's a lot that I don't know and that my subconscious knows, but I am unaware of, okay? So, and I've got to have a desire to shift from that place. You've heard of the term, ignorance is bliss. Essentially, that's saying I'm more than happy just to stay on autopilot. Even if that means living a life where I'm just tolerating it. I'm tolerating the kind of career I have. I'm tolerating the people that I'm around. I'm tolerating the level of finance that I get in. Again, our level of tolerance is set by usually our unwillingness to unpack the deeper things of what's going on inside of us. But if we do want to shift from that, then we move to a place called conscious incompetence. That's where I suddenly now become aware of what I don't know. Hopefully, right now, you're in this stage, because I'm maybe talking about some things that you weren't aware of, or maybe I'm going over some things that you once you heard but you didn't do anything with. But all of a sudden now I know what I don't know. I'm aware. Do you know what? I've got this deeper part of me that is calling the shots, pulling the strings, holding the wheel. And that's why I'm getting this conflict. Maybe even when I started to talk about that cognitive dissonance, that's suddenly making you think, maybe that's why I don't feel right now. Maybe that's why something's out of alignment in my life. So all of a sudden, I now know what I previously didn't know. But then it's now conscious. The next stage is to move from that place of I know what I don't know to conscious competence. In other words, I'm now conscious of what I need to know, and I am now able to do something about it, which is ultimately what I hope you're going to get to when you fully listen through this episode and the next episode. Okay? So I become conscious of now what I need to do. When I give you the 3 things that I have been doing and commit to doing, then I've seen the power of this in my life. So again, we become conscious of what we need to do. And then, of course, the more that we do that and we practice that, we then shift that from conscious competence to unconscious competence. In other words, I then unconsciously do what I need to do. Okay? I then consciously do what I need to do. And that cycle, it's a cycle of learning and growing and developing. And of course, that works both in positive, constructive ways. We deliberately want to reprogram ourselves, but it's happening even whether we like it or not, because that's how habits are formed. Okay? Habits become our automatic behavior, but they go through those stages, okay, of programming. So the question I want to ask you right now, and let's be brutally honest with ourselves, am I aware of what is working against me right now? Remember I said high performance is about the pursuit of pushing the barrier, pushing the envelope, pushing the boundaries, that are right now setting the capacity of my growth and my achievement. And so I need to be aware of what is working against me. And let me say this is the good news. The good news is, and I've used the illustration in a past episode, it's like the caterpillar and the butterfly metamorphosis, is that there's the stage of the chrysalis where the chrysalis is a tight restriction that isn't to prevent the butterfly coming out, but actually the tension and restriction is to help the formation of the butterfly. And I actually believe that this process of understanding what is in our subconscious, our belief system, and doing a deep dive to start to unpack it is actually, yes, it feels like it's a resistant process. In other words, it's simple, but it's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. But when I realize, wow, the cost of my future is the present. So if I really have a vision for a different future, if I really have a vision to see a different outcome, but I'm not willing to pay the cost of going through this process, of really understand what is working against me, and to stop, and maybe this is for somebody listening to this, to stop blaming what is external to me. Now, there may be resistant factors that are external to you right now, that are playing a role in hindering you. But again, I'm a firm believer that what is in you is stronger than what is around you. Again, from a faith perspective, I believe if I'm created in the image of God, I'm called by God, I have an assignment from God, then ultimately anything that He's put in me will be stronger than anything that comes against me. But regardless of your faith position, I believe that potential in you is enough to push through the resistance that you're feeling right now. But I've got to be committed to the process of becoming aware of what is restricting me right now. And that's where the process of evaluation, asking questions, is absolutely key. It unlocks the door to self-awareness, using feedback, allowing others to speak into that unconscious incompetence, me not knowing what I need to know. It's not necessarily how can I put it? It's not necessarily, a pleasant journey. It's not an easy journey, but it is worthwhile. So I want to encourage you right now, some of the barriers you think you can't break through, you absolutely can, because the barriers are in you. They are not in front of you. And so I hope in the next episode, when you've just had a bit of time maybe to ask this question, what am I aware of what is working against me? And I start to think through some of the things that I've talked about, then let's come back and let's look at 3 things that you can do to start to make that shift to being in control of your life, at the wheel, and be empowered. Come on, let's take control. Let's be courageous. Let's release the greatness that's in you. I hope today's episode was helpful to you. You can get more by subscribing to my channel, and I have more content and tools that can help you on your journey if you'd like to head over to garethmorgan.tv. Remember, today and every day you are a champion, and there is more in you than you think.